This episode is brought to you by regret and bad choices.
Are you ready?
Starting now?
Well, now you just messed it up, you knob. God, you know that the shit that we go through for this, huh?
I know. Fuckers better appreciate it. When we started, we were just like, yeah, we're just going to do this, man. You know, shoot our wad into the wind and see what happens. What's the title of this podcast again?
I don't know. Objects, I don't know. Something with a penis, I guess.
Right.
Our fucking faces are everywhere now.
Right.
You know, but
You're welcome, ladies.
Right. Popular with the ladies. Right. Oh, I'm not even going to apologize because hopefully it sounds fucking hilarious.
Yeah, totally. This is fucking explicit now.
The explicit button. Let me use my finger.
La, 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 la.
It is time for another episode of Sober, Not Mature. And that episode starts now.
All right, everyone. Welcome once again to another episode of Sober, Not Mature. And there's good news tonight. Well, it's the start of season 7, which is not even the good news. The good news is everyone out there, you don't just have to listen to us tonight. We have a guest. He will introduce himself here in a minute, but get out your notepads, get out your workbooks, because we're going to talk about heroin tonight.
All right.
But Alex, go ahead and introduce yourself. Where you're from. Obviously, plug your book real quick. We'll talk about the book a little bit, obviously in more detail later. But introduce yourself to begin with, and let everyone know who you are.
Absolutely. Well, my name is Alex. My name's Alex Schotten. If you're looking up for the author bio, you got to look up the full name. There's a lot of Alexes in this world. But I'm 30 years old. I am originally from Wisconsin, right outside of Green Bay. A huge Packer fan.
Christ, I'm outnumbered.
I now live in Tucson, Arizona. I just moved here about almost 2 years ago now. I go down to school at the University of Arizona here for psychology. And I just recently released my second collection of poetry. It is called I Learned How to Love from Heroin. It is basically it's the closest thing to like a memoir in the form of, short stories and poems and short prose and poems that kind of highlights and, dives into the trauma and, the life of addiction and heroin addiction. And I kind of frame it in a way where it's more of like a relationship. So it's kind of like me and like my love of heroin. So yeah, that's kind of the short spiel.
Okay. Yeah. So when Mike said outnumbered, I lived in Wisconsin for, 30, if I'm doing the math, 35 plus years.
Oh, very cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Milwaukee area, again,
Cool.
Huge Green Bay Packer fan.
Gotta be.
So real quick, where outside of Green Bay, what town did you live in?
Appleton, since because you'll know Appleton. So
my daughter, my son-in-law, my grandson live in Appleton.
Oh wow, such a small world. That is amazing. That's awesome. My sister's there still.
Well, and guess where I'm going to be tomorrow? I'm going to be in Appleton because I'm babysitting for my grandson. But
that's awesome.
I'm super familiar with that, and they've lived in Appleton for a number of years. When my ex and I got divorced, her and her boyfriend at the time, and then husband moved up to Appleton. So my daughter, she's 37. Yeah, 37. She's been up there. Shit. If not 30 years, close to it. I think she's probably 8 or 9, I think, when they moved up there. So, I've spent a lot of time in Appleton, all around Wisconsin. But yeah, I'm going to be there tomorrow. So, hey, if we got nothing else to talk about during this next hour and a half, let's talk some Scotty. We'll talk some Scotty shit. We'll drive Mike fucking nuts.
Where are you two located at now?
Mike?
I'm in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay, cool.
Yep, and I'm actually I'm in Valparaiso, Indiana at the moment. I'm at
Cool.
our sister's house. The short stories, when our mom was sick about almost 3 years ago, I gave up my place in Milwaukee, came down here to help out with our mom as she was getting towards the end of her time. and she died 2.5 years ago. No, a little over 2 years ago now, right? Like 2 years, 3 months,
Right.
4 months.
October. Yep.
Yeah, October of 22, right?
Yep.
Yes. And yeah, I travel around also, but that's a whole nother story that everyone else is probably sick of hearing about. But if you ever hop on Instagram, yeah, you'll see plenty of posts about that. But yeah, this is HQ for the podcast, HQ for me when I'm not running around the country. But yeah, and don't let me forget, Alex, I want to make sure I get if you're on Instagram, Facebook, anything like that, I want to make sure
Yes,
that I put that
absolutely.
in the episode. So we'll either email it to me later, just as a side note, but I want to be able to get that on there too. So, we were talking just briefly before we started, and I mentioned obviously we don't really have a format, don't really have a structure, except for one thing, right, Mike? I mean, Alex, I'm guessing you're going to get into your story. We want to hear about your story. We want to hear about the book. Basically, be a whore and whore out your book, because that's what that's one of the
All
reasons
right.
we love to have people on.
That's why
It's
we're
not just
here.
not just to talk about this stuff, but if you're doing something and promoting something, whether it's this, it sounds like you might have done something before, anything you're involved in, talk about it. I could put links to everything, and we want to do that. But if you're going to tell your story, Mike, how do we handle that?
Right. Well, we already know how to get fuck up our lives, and fuck up the lives of everyone around us. We know how to do that. Obviously qualified, that's all cool, but we fucking hate drunkalogs.
Absolutely.
So, or drugalogs or whatever, doesn't matter. The substance doesn't matter. Um, so yeah, that's basically it, man. We don't want a drunk log. Qualify yourself. That's cool. But, tell your story. We're interested in the solution.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree with that 100%. I can dive into my story a little bit right now, actually.
Go
if you
ahead.
wanna-
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll give you a little bit more of a background of me. Honestly, like I remember like my first couple times in like treatment when, I would get on the war story path. And like now that I'm like, 30 years old, I look back on it and my story isn't much different from the hundreds of others of people's that like I've
Nobody's
met. You know
is.
what I mean? It really isn't. Like, I've talked to so many people, heard so many different stories that like there isn't really much that I can spiel on about that anybody else hasn't, experienced or know somebody that's experienced. But I lived a pretty simple childhood. I had some childhood trauma. I was a victim of sexual assault when I was, a very small child, like 7 or 8 years old. But beyond that, I had like one of those amazing, my parents were amazing. My sister is amazing. My whole family is amazing. There wasn't really anything that was, huge or, super, super traumatic beyond that. I don't want to minimize that, but I also want to, you know, help people understand that like I lived a great life. But the one thing that was very apparent growing up that I think is one of the most important things as I kind of learned how to recover and learned how to find fulfillment in my recovery is I noticed very early on that like I just didn't feel right. Nothing really felt right. I always felt like I was chasing after something and it wasn't good enough whenever I got to it. So like I had those like feelings and those thoughts very early on in my life, middle school, high school. And, as I got into high school, I basically, for lack of a better term, I was your stereotypical, athlete that got hurt and I got diagnosed with a chronic illness at like the exact same time. And I ended up in the hospital and I was just basically the stereotypical, athlete that got put on opiates really early on. And this was kind of before there was the opioid epidemic, for lack of a better term. And it wasn't really, there wasn't a lot known about it. There wasn't a lot of studies done about it. It was still very early on. And yeah, that was kind of it. It was just a straight downhill path. The doctors started giving me opiates and they fixed everything. They fixed, my injury. I had a torn meniscus in my knee and then I'd been diagnosed with Crohn's. So it fixed all the pain. And then it also fixed that feeling in my head where I felt like I was chasing after something that I couldn't get. So it was basically, it was an absolute cure all. Like if I could go back and look at the 16-year-old me, I thought I found the answer. Like
Right.
I was convinced that like, because I didn't know about, like how it was going to end up. I didn't know that I was going to be homeless. I didn't know that I was going to be in prison. I didn't know that all these like awful things were going to happen. I just knew at the time that like, hey, I found the answer.
Yep.
I found exactly what I need to make sure that I live the life that I want to live.
Mm-hmm.
And And it didn't last long. It was a quick. I mean, I say it didn't last long, but 6-7 years it was over, and it ended up with me in prison. I ended up getting in trouble for selling heroin. Eventually you go. I went from the stealing. I went through all the different modes of getting money and the stealing and the ruining relationships, all of that stuff. Put it all into there and pretty much threw all that away. But I ended up getting sentenced to prison and did about 2.5 years for some heroin charges. And yeah, that's kind of where it all changed for me. I'll dial back a little bit, and I'm a yapper, so like sometimes I go all over the place, but I hope that'll be all right for you all.
It's
You know what?
just fine.
That's the basic of this podcast. Literally, and I tell Mike I listen to a lot of different sober podcasts. Ones that I enjoy, and ones that are usually a few that are very structured. Other ones where they'll be talking, they're like, "Well, this is off topic," and then I tell Mike, I'm like, "That's everything. Everything
Yeah.
we talk about is off topic. I mean, we have an idea. The only structure that we have in every episode is the reading that Mike does at the beginning." And we started that because he literally, Mike, you missed that from doing it in group.
Yeah.
And it's number one, it fulfilled something for him, but it's a wonderful discussion point for us, and literally keeps our heads straight for 20 minutes an
Yeah,
episode.
exactly. And then we start rambling on about a bunch of other nonsense.
Hey,
Right.
20 minutes is 20 minets, though.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, we're connecting with something in that 20-minute period. But no, I mean, it's to Mike's point. Yeah, ramble on. Go for it.
Perfect. And to your point there, when I listened to that last episode, it has been a long time since I have been a part of like a daily reading like that. That brought back a lot of memories. That brought back a lot of just a lot of emotion, even at the same time. So I'll kind of dive into that. Before I got to prison, I was in treatment. I'm I've been to treatment 7 or 8 times,
Sure.
all over the place. I've been to treatment in Arizona. I've been to treatment in Florida. My rotation or cycle was get treatment. My treatment would sponsor me to go somewhere because they said that I needed to, get out of the city, get out of Wisconsin. I would go there. I would use everybody and everything and squeeze everything I could out of whatever opportunity I was given, and then I'd go back to using wherever I was at.
Right.
And so I kind of just did that cycle all around the United States for a little bit there. But I think it's important to mention that before I ended up in prison, I was introduced to recovery multiple different times through multiple different programs, and it planted such a seed. So like by the time that I got to prison, like I was pretty beat down, and I so many people had tried to help me. I had worked the 12 steps, in multiple different communities with amazing men. And I had so many people had poured their cup into me. There were so many seeds planted in me that when I got to prison, it was like a game changer. Like I know there's a lot of people that will be like, prison doesn't work, incarceration doesn't work. For me, it put me in a position where those seeds that were planted in me through those, 7 or 8 treatments, that it just blossomed in there. I had such an interesting and, diversely cool experience in prison, for lack of a better term. And that's not to minimize, the trauma. I do that a lot. I'm pretty self-aware, and I do happen to minimize a lot of the trauma I went through. But in all things considered, I had a really good experience in prison. I was around a lot of men that, were on or trying to be on the right path, and a lot of older people that saw themselves in me as just a young, 22-year-old kid. And they saw that those seeds that I had planted, the talking points came out really well. I had learned how to be very good at lip service, and I could teach an AODA class. I could run a treatment center if all it required me to do was talk. The action was not going to be there at that time. The action was not there. But
Right.
if I just had to talk my way through it, I was perfect in that.
Absolutely.
As much as you could be. And I think that I was lucky enough to be put around people that saw that in me in a place, in a prison where you don't get a lot of that, recovery. And it just kind of blossomed. And that's where I started writing poetry again. That's where I started, writing again. That's where I started journaling again. And it's kind of where it's kind of where I first found recovery, for lack of a better term. I had been introduced to it, like, so many times. And, people always ask me, like, why didn't it work? Why didn't it work? And I don't have a good answer. Besides, I was just an immature kid, you know what I mean? That just didn't really, understand, what was really going on inside my own head, inside like my trauma and all that kind of stuff. But once I got there, man, it was kind of like everything was able to flow out of me freely. And it was cool. Yeah, I started, that's where poetry got started again. That's how I made most of my money in there. I teamed up with a guy, and I would write poems and he would draw cards, and we would sell those. So we kind of had like this little Hallmark card hustle thing kind of going on in prison, for lack of a better term. And that's kind of where I realized that, like, I really love doing that. Like, I really just loved writing sappy poems. Sappy soft poems was kind of what made my brain feel okay, for lack of a better term. So it was a really cool and interesting experience to find my recovery in prison.
So real quick, and Mike, maybe you had the same thought, but Mike, do you have any input about why it worked when he was, regardless of where he was at the time? Do you have any idea why it might have worked at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. He started putting all those principles into practice.
Yeah, as you did the work, Alex, is why it worked. And
Exactly.
and here's the thing, and we both kind of laughed at that because. I was 41 when I got sober. Mike was 43 at this run through, and we've known people that have been older than us. We've known people as young as 19 and 20. There's 2-3 guys that had multiple. I mean, like decades of sobriety when we came in that were only in their 40s, so they were like early 20s when they got sober.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, all these stories that we've heard, it's when people start to do. It's doing the work,
Yep.
And like you just said. The lip service and all that stuff, but the action wasn't there, and we talk about that all the time. It's one thing we can all. I think most of us, some of us talk more. I talk more than Mike does, but Mike can talk a good game. Clearly, you talk a lot like I do, Alex. But we all can talk a good game. But it's like, what are we going to do behind that? I mean, talking is one thing, but we've got to get out there and we've got to fucking do something. It's talking about it does nothing. So that would be our thought, maybe, that you started doing the work.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, and I think it came out in like my actions too. Like I wasn't involving myself in like shit that I shouldn't have involved myself in. Like I was going to the gym twice a day. I was going out and I was taking a morning walk, and I was taking a walk before they closed the yard at nighttime. Like I was doing all these things that I knew. Even at the time, I really wasn't doing it consciously. At the time, I was just trying to live the most comfortable lifestyle I could live, and that's how I felt that I could do it. But those little habits and those little things all started to add up that when, now looking back on it, it's like, oh yeah, I understood what I needed to do without even consciously understanding what I needed to do. I did it because so many people had, poured so much into me that I just kind of already knew what needed to happen.
And it sounds like you got, from what you have said, you got around some good, solid people when you were in there too, which helps because then, same deal, you get the right influence. I didn't want to get sober. Everyone's heard me say that before. I don't need to get into the whole story, but thankfully because Mike and I met at the Keating Center in Cleveland. We met in that facility and around the same people, blah, blah, blah. But the whole point is there was a really good group of guys, a good group of solid guys, good group of guys coming in to do group and do the meetings and all this sort of thing. So,
right.
So these people, these really positive influences, people that were doing the work and had already had this level of sobriety and level of peace and serenity and decent lives that they were living, right, Mike? I mean, and then
absolutely.
So that's what we got to live with, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, that was it. We had same thing, man. It doesn't matter if you're in prison, you're in a center, you're just going to a bunch of meetings all the time, whatever. You get yourself around a support group, a good group of guys or girls or whatever you need to be around. And right. And you start doing what they do. And shit, it fucking works.
Lo and behold,
right.
Exactly what they told you was going to works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're like, hey, Mike, tell him about our buddy Tony, what he did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So our buddy Tony, right? He was married. He still is married to his wife, Angel. They both had guests on the show here. And
his wife went into treatment and she got a sponsor, and the sponsor says you can have nothing to do with them. They've been together for a long, long time. They've been running for like 15 years, married together, partners in crime, all that good stuff. And she started working the program, and it pissed him off, right? And she wouldn't have anything to do with him until he got his shit together, or didn't, or whatever, but wasn't going to have anything to do with him. And he said, fine, I'm going to go get myself into a program. I'm going to start working this program. I'm going to work all these fucking steps to the best of my ability to prove to you motherfuckers that it doesn't work. And he's right. And he's sober like 12 years now.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I've known Tony for a long time. And the first time I heard that story was within the last 3 years. Once we started doing this, Mike brought it up one time. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? They did that?
Yeah.
And then, we had Tony on and made him tell the story, and it was brilliant. I'm going to prove to you motherfuckers that this doesn't work. I'm going to do everything like you said. I'm going to follow the directions, but this is going to show you it's not going to work.
And it worked.
And it worked. So real quick question, Alex. So with the poetry and the writing and the journaling, because you said you started doing it again when you were in prison. So was that, first of all, I guess 2 questions. So that's when you started your string of sobriety in prison, and then also did you do writing and journaling prior and then picked it back up, or did they coincide?
Yeah, so I've always been like a book nerd. Like when I was a kid, like I found solace in just reading books and just writing and just scribbling stuff down. It's actually funny. Like I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, and like all my parents' books have just grease stains on them, just complete grease stains. Because I wouldn't even like leave the table, like I wouldn't eat dinner at the table unless like I had a book to read in my hand. I was that attached to literature. So as a young kid, it was kind of there. And then I kind of got away from it. I started playing sports, and sports was, I fit in a lot more when I played sports. It was a lot easier for me to fit in. It was a lot easier for me to feel okay when I was like playing sports and like around other people, rather than when I was just always reading books. So I got away from it kind of as I got older. And then I it was just out of boredom, honestly, in prison that I kind of got back into it. And I realized how much I loved it. I started out reading, and I read so many books while I was in there. And after a while, I'm like, well, why don't I try writing again and see how that feels? And it was just kind of a spiral after that, a good spiral.
Right. No, that's cool. And I know a lot of people do that. I mean, when we went into the Keating Center, I hadn't literally picked up a physical book in years, and I couldn't get enough because I needed something to do other than just, I didn't know how to just be with myself.
Right.
And,
exactly.
I read, we had this chapel area, and then a ton of books in there, and I don't even know what I read, but I just kept reading, and my mom had books and my sister had books, and I would just sit around in my downtime. It was an escape for me, at that time frame. And now I sit on my lazy ass and I watch TV at night. But I get out and I go hiking trails and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, I can't sit down and read. I listen to audiobooks. I'll take in information because I do a lot of driving. But I can't sit down and read. It makes me tired.
Right.
But I love taking in the information, but I do it in audiobooks now. But so the writing and the poetry started up in prison. Were you writing about, kind of like what you're talking about now, your experience as you're using and your, obviously that type of experience, or was just the general stuff?
Yeah, back then it was pretty much, unless I was doing like the cards, like when we were doing like the Hallmark kind of cards, those were just kind of your like actual typical like Hallmark, what you would see if you were buying like a card at the store, because like what we were literally doing was, helping people, like get cards to their family for birthdays and stuff like that. So beyond that, if I was just writing like by myself in my cell, it was pretty much all like using and addiction related at that time. There wasn't really much to branch out from beyond that, I think, because my head was so consumed with,
yeah, you're right. What you know.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And being in prison, it was like every single day, it was like a reminder, like every single thing that I did, every time a guard made me stand up for a count, like everything was a reminder of like, hey, this is your addiction. So that's pretty much all I wrote when I was in there. Some of those poems did end up in the book. Like some of the poems that I wrote like back then, maybe not like the full poem, but like there might be a couple of lines that I scribbled down in a notebook that turned into a poem later on that ended up in my latest book.
Okay. It was just, I was kind of curious if, and I know that a lot of people bring out, I mean, we joke about it all the time. Hey, right, Mike, what are you going to do? What are we going to do now that now
That
that
we're
we're
not
sober?
drinking and using,
Yeah.
right?
And there's a lot of people that we know that, again, the creative side comes out, or, certainly they start to be good people and they pick up new hobbies and that sort of thing. But we've had a number of people on here, at least a handful of people now that have written books, and
Mhm.
it's always interesting to me where that motivation. I like to write. I don't do it like, I don't know. I never. Not never. I'll write some articles that are sobriety related if it's for a particular website or something like that I talk about, usually more of a, I don't know, sobriety thing, societal thing, but I've never done like my story type of thing. And the reason it is because two things. There's plenty of other people out there. It's like podcasts. Everyone's got a goddamn podcast. But everyone's got a sobriety thing. I'll let the people who really know what they're doing stick to that. I'll write about something else. But it's a comfort zone for me, and it's a release, and sometimes it's just good to get shit down on paper, like that. So um when when did you actually when's your sobriety date, or when was the date for you that you, and I don't know what your background is. I know you talked about 12 step or whatever. Do you consider yourself sober, alcohol free? What do you consider yourself, I guess, to begin with?
Yeah, let's dive into that, because I always find this interesting too, because I had, like, before I went to prison, like I say that I was introduced to recovery like multiple ways. I tried like all the programs like before I went to
Mhm.
prison. I tried the AANA, worked the steps. Probably at my time I thought it was the best of my ability, but I'm sure that I could go back and dive into that 19-year-old kid's mind and get some more out of them now. Now looking back. But I tried Smart Recovery. I forget there was one other one that was pretty popular not too long ago that I tried as well. But I consider myself, like, I consider my date to find recovery like September 27th, 2016. That was the day I overdosed and ended up going to jail and ended up in prison. Like, I didn't get out after that. But good old Alex, when he got out of prison, I wanted to, being from Wisconsin, drink successfully for,
Sure.
yeah, like I had to. Like, there was no way that I was going to get out of prison and not try to drink successfully when I first got out. And I bartend. It's pretty much, I still, to this day, I'm the local sober bartender in my neighborhood now. But so I immersed myself immediately out of prison into the alcohol culture of Wisconsin. And for lack of a better term, I like to say, for lack of a better term, I drank successfully. But what I mean by that is, like, I didn't have any like major, like, huge consequences that like heroin brought on for me. But
Sure.
I didn't like myself. I didn't like the person that I was. I didn't like alcohol in the first place. I've never been a drinker whatsoever. I've never really liked the taste of it. So I just completely forced myself to try to be a part of this culture, which is my addiction just screaming at me. But after about a year of doing that, I couldn't do it anymore. I didn't like myself and I quit drinking. So I say the day that I entered recovery was September 26, 2016, but I stopped drinking somewhere around 2019, 2020. But I don't know
Okay.
the exact date. But yeah, that's kind of how I explain it.
Right, and the reason I asked that, and Mike and I were brought up. Well, Mike, you could talk about it in a minute. You've dealt with a couple of different type of programs, but
Mhm.
my dad was sober. My dad was an Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew of it. My dad died 29 years sober, so I mean that's a program I knew. And when we went into the Keating Center, that's the program that they introduced us to. Um, I knew somebody, I knew a number of people, actually a handful of people in Wisconsin. When you mentioned smart recovery, I've heard it in other areas, but there's a focus, it seems, of smart recovery around Wisconsin. I noticed that a little bit. I don't think I went to any meetings with it, but I know of it a little bit.
Right.
But then, since we've been doing the podcast on Instagram, we met and had the pleasure, quite honestly, of being introduced to a lot of different things. A lot of different ways that people are staying sober, and I think it's interesting. Our mindset is it doesn't really matter what you do. Mike says it best, and as long as you're not out there, fucking hurting anyone, he doesn't care. Care what you
Right.
do.
Right.
Right.
Um, but Alcoholics Anonymous is our thing. But this is not. And we from the start we decided we talk about AA openly. We talk about the fact we're members. We went through. It's our thing. But somebody's out there doing their own thing or whatever their thing is, so be it. We've had people on that's like, dip their toe into AA for whatever reason it didn't work. They got their foundation, they're starting AA. That wasn't for them, so they did this. And these are people with long-term sobriety. So who are we to say, that sort of thing? But Mike, when you were in California, that
Mhm.
program that you were in, was that
Right.
through the Salvation Army? No. Or yes?
Yeah, that was one of them. Yeah, but I mean, everyone I ever went to, they all encouraged us to go to 12-step meetings one way or another, AA, NA, whatever, CA, HA, all of them. But they're all, and even from my experience, the other programs are still kind of based in it.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
getting out of yourself. It's smashing your ego. It's
Yep.
being of service to other people. However you get there, I don't give a fuck. Like Bill said, I don't. As long as that's just it, man. Making yourself a better person for the people around you. That's all that fucking matters. And if you're doing that, more than likely, you're not going to need to pick up a drink or a drug. You're just not. You're making yourself a better person, and you don't need that crutch anymore. You don't need that garbage to fill the hole that we have in us, that we all have in us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was just like I said, just interesting to me that so you consider yourself to be again, more of an you don't necessarily identify yourself as sober, but entering recovery, and it's words differently, but you live a life that does not have substance abuse in it anymore.
Right, exactly. And like honestly, like I spent so much time in and out of the rooms of AA that like I still like to this day, like when I talk about my sobriety, when I talk about my recovery, like it's almost all AA and NA principles that I'm talking.
Right.
Like it's almost all, and I agree a lot with like what you said, Mike, is pretty much
Yeah.
smart recovery is AA, NA. It's just the goal is I feel like the goal is a little bit different. They just shift the goal just a little bit different just so it appeases to different ways of thinking and different ways of learning, but
Right.
in all the essence of them all is exactly the same. And so yeah, I like to nowadays say that like I entered recovery at this day, or I'm in recovery.
Right.
And yeah, that's just the easiest way for me to put it. I think the other thing I think is really cool is I've seen this shift over since I found recovery and what I found in prison for recovery, and then that kind of short period where I thought I was Superman and could drink in the Wisconsin culture. I've seen a little bit of a shift in the stigma towards like different pathways. Like I've seen this shift where people are just kind of way more accepting of like medically assisted treatment. I have a lot of friends that are very successful on medically assisted treatment. I was not. I tried both methadone and Suboxone, and neither one of those worked for me. It was almost just as bad, if not worse than the heroin addiction for me. But I also know people that have successfully been on Suboxone for 10 years and then, tapered off and are successfully living a great life now. So it's like, I'm really happy that we saw that shift in the stigma, because there's always going to be stigma from the outside. There's always going to be the normies, for lack of a better term, are always going to look a little bit differently at us. But I think it's really good that we've kind of tackled the stigma within our own community, because there's no point. There's no point to ever, fight alongside one another, because we're all after the exact same goal.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Hopefully. Yeah. The goal is
hopefully. Right.
Yeah. Right. Stop hurting ourselves and stop hurting the people around us. Period. That's
exactly.
And however you get there, who fucking cares? As long as you get there.
Right. And the funny part too, so both of us, both Mike and I got sober in 2010. And, I didn't really know. I heard about, I moved back to Wisconsin in 2013, probably 2015 range is the first time I met somebody, and she was involved in smart recovery. And I knew nothing about it up until that point. I'd never even heard of it. And then when we started doing the podcast, and that's when I joined Instagram under the SoberNotMature thing, which is coming up on 3 years ago. That's when, well, first of all, and I say this all the time, So I get on Instagram and I hear about everyone's talking about their sober Instagram. Just search this, and I met a couple of people that are like, "Yeah, just follow the people that I follow, and you'll grow this network." And we have, and I keep seeing all this AF stuff, AF this and AF that. And I'm like, "Oh, these people like ass fuck whatever," And I'm like, I said that to somebody. They're like, "That stands for alcohol free, you fucking Nimrod." And I'm like, oh, I'm like, I don't know, I didn't know. I never heard of alcohol free. I never heard of sober curious. I never
Right.
heard of gray area drinking. I never even understood. I got it, the concept of people, trying to stay sober without, it was mainly, I knew people who were, the alcoholic variety of that probably needed AA, probably needed that type of structured program straight from it, could never stay sober. So I didn't understand all these other processes and all these other things. And it's been a real eye opener. And I love to learn things and take on new things. And we've had plenty of people on the podcast. We don't have, it's not like we have guests all the time, but when we do, there's always a little bit of something different. But we've had straight AA people on here, Mike. I mean, we've had
Sure.
people, all the people from Cleveland, but then we've had people that are just not, So it's interesting to me. The path can be, everyone's on the same path. It's a wide roadway with a bunch of different
Mhm.
lanes. Somebody's on the inside lane, somebody's in the middle lane, but we're all going to the same goddamn place,
Yep.
And it's really cool. But the changes in that between again 2010 to now, there's been so many again eye-opening things. And you're right, there's been so much more of an openness. I see more people on LinkedIn, this professional network, talking about recovery. You see more people on Instagram. You see people just in general, these bars, these stores, these restaurants, all that have non-alcoholic drinks, and huge menus and huge sections. And it's just that there's been a change, in a cultural change, in a really positive way, I think. But there's still people out there that, oh, you don't drink? Ugh.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. That'll never change.
Right. So you mentioned the Wisconsin culture, and I kind of laughed at that because here's the thing: I couldn't have stayed in Wisconsin. At the time I didn't know what I needed to do. I sure as hell didn't want to get sober, but I was taken out of Wisconsin to Cleveland, and obviously got sober out there. Not obviously, but got sober out there. But then moving back to Wisconsin and being around different people, and it was a change. It was amazing to me. It was easy enough to find sober people if you're looking for them, going to a meeting or that sort of thing.
Right.
So that was easy enough. But it was a real eye opener to me, getting back around that situation. I don't want to say, I don't know, were we sheltered in Cleveland right away, Mike? I suppose, I
Yeah,
mean,
well,
that's
yeah.
all we did, first few years is hung around, meetings and sober people all the time. Right. For the most part. But, it was kind of amazing. It was eye opening everywhere that you went. I just realized that every part of my life, involved alcohol. Whereas, I mean, if somebody's a drug user, they didn't, maybe I'm only going here because I can use, or I'm only going here because I drink. It's just what everyone did.
Right. Absolutely.
So do you think that was, I mean, was that truly difficult for you to be, or is it now, to be in an area where, I don't know, where people are drinking? Do you still find challenges in that, or no?
Well, that's interesting, because I work at a bar. I work at like a pretty much a little mom and pop dive bar down here in Arizona now, and like it was interesting because like I'm the only sober one there. Well, that's not true. We just hired somebody else in recovery, which is awesome. She's an amazing person, and it's been
Hmm.
awesome to connect with her as well. But like for a while, it was just me, and like it's in like a not it's in like a very industrial part of town, so it's a very like we get a lot of like blue collar, and we get a lot of like rough and tough people, and their first reaction when I tell them that I don't drink, because they'll offer to buy me a drink, or they'll offer to like
Mhm.
buy me this. I'll be like, well, I don't drink, and their first reaction is like, what? And then they find out I'm from Wisconsin, and then they're like, this makes absolutely no sense. Why are you? What are you doing? What are you doing behind the bar making me a drink right now? And I'm just like, it's awesome because every single time that I have this conversation with somebody, like because most of them know me, or they like have had enough interaction with me that like they know my personality, and they know my character, and they know how like I interact with people respectfully, we have a really good conversation, and it's led to a lot of conversations that I never expected to have with people that I never expected to be open to that kind of thing, you know, and it really shows how much addiction and alcoholism touches everybody's lives, because every time that I have the conversation with somebody, they've usually been affected or know somebody that, you know, has been deeply affected. So I think at this point in my life, it's not too difficult. When I first got out of prison though, and I was bartending in Wisconsin, even with me not liking alcohol, I drank every day, you know, just because that was just, it was what was around me. And the effect of it still made me feel better. You know, like it still, it was enough of an effect on me that it numbed enough, but it also wasn't too much that I could still minimize and be like, well, this isn't heroin, you know, like I'm not doing heroin. And that was good. Like I sat kind of in that middle ground where I'm like, well, I'm not getting so fucked up that like, I'm getting like heroin fucked up, but I'm also not feeling all of my emotions. So it was like this really cool middle ground that I convinced myself was like healthy, because I wasn't having these profound consequences that, you know, like I wasn't losing everything, you know, I wasn't going to jail every other week, and like everything was pretty normal. I would have maybe a wild night out with my friends every once in a while, but beyond that, I didn't have the behavioral consequences that I had through addiction, through my heroin addiction. So it was like, it was a very easy way to justify it all in my head, even though I knew it was doing damage like to my mental health.
Yeah, but you're like, hey, but it's not heroin.
Exactly. Right. It's not heroin. Yeah, we're good.
No, it just kind of made me laugh because it usually gets brought up in certain circumstances, but I've never done any drugs, you know, and I was just a boozer, and that's all that I ever did.
He's that weirdo.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, and people, everyone that we know, with very few exceptions, all of our friends, Mike included. Mike's done everything. Mike's done all the things. Whatever I thought I might want to do, he's done it 4 times. You know,
I have.
And but I mean, all of our friends, everyone was at least dual, if not triple or quadruple addicted to something. You know, but the thing of it is that, you know, I was just killing myself slower. You know, and I'm convinced that based on my mentality and the way my mind was and what I was, you know, clearly searching for in the I want to get fucked up range, all the drugs would have done for me is they would have got me there, but it would have killed me, you know?
Right.
And I mean, I was close enough to death. I probably would have been, not even probably, I'm convinced that if I would have ended up doing drugs on a regular basis, I would have liked it and I would have died, you know, long before I even had the chance to get sober. That's why it made me laugh, you know, well, at least it's not heroin. Because I mean, yeah, on a certain extent, yeah, but yeah, I was getting myself, I was close enough to death on my own anyhow, without getting the drug use in there. So, but you know, this actually seems, what do you think, Mike? Seems like a good breaking point.
It does. Well, we'll be right back with more Sober Not Mature and Alex, and we're going to find out more about his book right after these words from our sponsors.
Hey everyone, it's your friends at Sober Not Mature.
Hi there.
Yes, it's both of your friends this time. Hi Mike, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, Bill?
I am doing well, but we do have a purpose. We actually usually talk about our one website, but we actually have 2 websites now. So 2 websites in one. All right, so everyone knows we still have the podcast website that is www.SoberNotMature.com. And we just launched the store website, so we also have that. Do you know what the website address is on that one, Mike?
Of course I don't.
It's pretty easy, Mike. It's www.SoberNotMatureShop.com. But from the podcast website, you can still hit the store link and get into the web store, or you can access it from our Instagram page through the highlights. We've been posting quite a bit about it, and we'll continue to do that. But do you know what's on the second website, Mike?
Well, there's a store. There are products that you can purchase for you and your loved ones.
Well, Mike, do we still have merchandise?
We have merchandise. Well, we got T-shirts and coffee mugs and all kinds of crap.
And one of the coolest parts, we also do have all the recovery books from Hazelden, which is kind of a big deal.
That is a big deal.
At least for us. So all the books that we read, God Grant Me 24 Hours, the Big Book, the 12 and 12, all of those books are available for sale on our website. And
They
once
are.
again, that store website is www.sober.
Trying to help, man.
I know you are. You're not helping though. Okay, now I got to say www.SoberNotMatureShop.com.
.com.
.com. Visit that today, or visit the podcast website, which is, again, the podcast website. So
www.SoberNotMature.com.
did you just say sober but not mature?
Yeah, sure. Write that down.
Yeah, like fucking mush mouth or something. All right, everyone, you've suffered enough with this, and we'll get back to what we were talking about previously. So visit the websites, though. All right, everyone, welcome back. And yes, speaking of heroin, that's a hell of a good segue, Mike. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. You set that up perfectly. But so tell us about the book, anything and everything you want, and then your email. And I looked up the website. So the poetry thing, are you involved in like a poetry group? Is there another book you did? Tell us all the shit that you're into, so everyone can buy some stuff from you.
Absolutely. I would absolutely love to do that. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I kind of got back into poetry, because of course when I went back into that drinking culture outside of prison, I didn't write. Who wants to write? I didn't need that anymore. The writing that was filling the void that the alcohol was now filling, I didn't need to do any writing. So I fell off from that. I got a great career working, doing epoxy concrete with a buddy's small company. And I kind of just convinced myself to, like, hey, I'm just going to do this career path. I'll just drink in this Wisconsin culture, and I'll just be an absolutely normal human being. And like I kind of mentioned earlier before, it didn't work. Very, very quickly, it did not work. So like, and you mentioned how the alcohol kind of like kills slowly. And I really resonate with that, because it did a number on my mental health, but it wasn't an apparent thing right away. I ended up going to therapy after, like, right when I was trying to get sober, right when I was sober curious is the word they use now. Right when I was trying to get sober curious from alcohol, I started going to therapy because the relationship I was in just wasn't going well. We were arguing about really dumb stuff. And I noticed a lot of what was going on in my head wasn't good. Like there was something not right there. And I ended up finding a therapist that I loved. He was an amazing man. He worked in prison before he worked on the street as a psychologist. And I ended up getting diagnosed with PTSD. And it didn't make a lot of sense to me at the time. I had friends that served and family that served in the military. And so PTSD to me was always like this like major thing that like people went through like incredibly hard times and like war and like, just crazy trauma. And I didn't realize that like these small bits and pieces of trauma that I had, experienced throughout my whole life without ever dealing with had snowballed into this, big, huge, mental health problem in my head. So after I was diagnosed with PTSD, I kind of started looking at ways that I could, help my mental health. So I started going to the gym, and like, so while I'm trying to be sober curious, I started going to the gym again. I got in good shape. I ended up quitting drinking as I was getting more into the gym, just because, I started to get kind of back into that prison mentality where it was like, okay, I know what I need to do in order to feel good. And now that the alcohol isn't in the picture, like I was kind of able to put the puzzle pieces back into place. And but it still didn't work. After about like 6-7 months, I was still feeling like super miserable. I couldn't really figure it out. I was going to therapy. The relationship that I was having trouble in was going really well. I had a great career. I was making really good money. I was going to the gym every day. I was doing literally like everything in my head that like I thought that I could do. And I remember sitting down with my dad one day, and he's a career psychologist. He's retired now, but I sat down with him one day, and I'm just like, I kind of need you to treat me like your client right now, because like I can't, because he always tried really hard not to do that. He was always really good at like not treating me like I was a client and treating me like I was his son. And I always respected that, from him a lot. But I just kind of said to him, I'm like, I need you to treat me like a client. I need you to help me figure out why I'm not feeling fulfilled, even though I feel like I'm doing everything that I should be doing. And it was apparent to him. He's like, I haven't seen you pick up a pen or a book since you've been out of prison, and that's all you talked about while you were in there. And it was like a light bulb just flipped in my head. I was like, oh, hold on, I want to make sure my computer just went idle mode for a second. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can
All
hear you.
right, all right, cool. My computer went idle. But anyway, he was like, yeah, you haven't picked up a pen or read a book since you got out of prison. And I was like, and it was literally like, oh, this makes perfect sense. So I dived into it right then. This was probably after all this came to fruition, 2022 sometime. And I quit my job, I quit my career. And I decided that I was going to figure out how to do something in poetry for my career and for my life. So I went back to just straight bartending. I had gotten to the point after I quit drinking, it was very easy for me to not drink again. I didn't really ever crave it again, I guess, because I think I realized pretty quick that there wasn't anything about it that I really liked. I was just doing it to do it, for lack of a better term. So I just went back to bartending, and I formed the collective that I called the Lifted Poet Society. And that happened in about 2022. And the goal with this society was to be able to create safe spaces for people to like publish, share, and like express and like view art. So it was kind of, the idea in my head was a community that advocates through art, for lack of a better term. It started out in like the depths of like just a bunch of random little ideas that I was throwing around. But then as it kind of came to fruition, I realized that it was something that I could do. So I started writing a lot more, and I started working on my first collection, which is called Tomorrow Stole Today. And it was a book it actually is based off like the meditation books that I would read in treatment. So it's a book of 365 poems, one for each day of the year, and it's kind of set up like a meditation style book. So like each poem you read a poem, and then like there's a little excerpt at the bottom that kind of explains my thoughts and feelings, and they're all poems that I had written sometime throughout my life. So they were poems that I wrote in prison, they were poems that I wrote before prison, they were poems that I wrote in different treatment centers. And it was a way for me to figure out how to self-publish, because my large goal vision for the collective is to be able to publish books for people that are in recovery. Like that's kind of the long-term goal, is to have an affordable way for people that are in recovery to like publish art, publish poetry, publish books, publish their photos, photography exhibits and stuff like that, is kind of the large vision to it all. And so I started writing that book. And as that kind of came to fruition, I decided that I needed to get out of Wisconsin. And it was largely due to the drinking culture, not so much of, I guess, not so much of me being worried about drinking or me feeling tempted to drink, but I really wanted to experience a culture that promoted wellness and kind of promoted poetry and promoted art more than what I was finding in Wisconsin. And my parents had started snowbirding in northern Tucson, Arizona, and the couple times that I had visited there, they had brought me around to different cultural and art museums and stuff like that, and I realized that the community down there was exactly what I was looking for. And so I decided in 2023 to pack up everything and officially make the Lifted Poet Society like an LLC, an actual company, and go out to Arizona and just kind of go out on a limb and try to do this thing. And so I did that. And things went really good and really, really bad all at the same time, which I think is I think that's just the balance of life.
Right.
But when I got down there, I immediately tore my ACL. Immediately. I mean, like 2 weeks there, I'm in the mountain. I did a lot of like marathon running and mountain running for a while there. And 2 weeks into my move in Arizona, I tore my ACL in the mountains. And it was just like, that was a thing. And then like my cat died like immediately after that. It was just like this whirlwind of like bad things started happening as soon as I made this decision. And I was so lost at first. I remember thinking to myself, like, what do? I just packed up everything. I quit my career. I took all the money I had to come down here and like get this apartment. And like, I had a brand new job bartending that, I'd only worked like 3 shifts at. Everything was just kind of falling apart. Like my cat was my best friend, and like everything was just like, I didn't really know what to do. And, so I did the only thing that I knew would work for the first time in my life. Like for the first time in my life, I took the actual tool that I had, and that was poetry. And I went to some random open mic at some random coffee shop that I had never been to. I was a distraught human. I had written a poem about my cat that I knew I was just going to absolutely just bawl over and cry. And I just went to this open mic and I just shared it with them. And I cried with a bunch of strangers. And it was like the most healing experience because I met people, everyone came up to me. They were people in recovery, people that, had family in recovery, people that ran treatment centers. Like it was just a poetry community of people that either were in recovery or understood recovery from like a firsthand or secondhand experience. And it was just like, it was one of those experiences where I was kind of like, hey, like this is the whole point of why I came down here. This is like what I want to do. And it was like everything went bad and then everything started to go good right away. So I entered that poem in a contest and actually won and
Nice.
I was flown out to Washington, D.C. for Mobilize Recovery. I don't know if you've ever heard of the conference called Mobilize Recovery, but they'll go to like different cities and they do kind of like a big joint like style conference where they bring a bunch of like different advocates and pathways to recovery all together. It was a really cool experience. I was a part of a storytelling narrative there. I got to perform a poem in front of Macklemore. So it was all this really cool stuff. But I mean, I've been yapping for a while. So if there's anything you want to ask, I'll kind of stop there. But that's kind of where everything started. So we kind of, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, so okay, I've got 2 things I got out of all of that. First of all, right, you took a chance and you went out and you followed your heart, which is good. Shit started to go bad because you were like by yourself, man. And so you took that next step and you went and you got out with other people. You got out of yourself. And really the whole thing with this collective is, I mean, what you're saying is you're helping yourself and you're doing things for yourself and you're writing, you're trying to promote your own poetry and whatever, but you're also trying to help other people,
Right.
being of service, bringing other people's lives, making other people's lives better, which is the fucking key to this whole thing. No matter if it's a 12-step or any other, whatever, recovery in itself, in its bare essence is making other people's lives better. And we talk about it all the time. And then somehow our lives get better because we're trying to do that.
Absolutely.
That's it, man. You fucking said it without saying it in the cliche ways that we hear in church basements all the fucking time.
It's cool.
Well, I was just gonna say, real quick. I don't mean to interrupt you. Sorry about that, but
fine.
It's so funny. There's been 2 or 3 people I can think of right off the bat, Mike, that we talked to on here.
Mhm.
One guy's name was Nico. Same thing. He went through this, hardcore stuff and tried a little 12-step thing. Wasn't for him. But then he's telling us about all these things. He's like, I got involved with some people and I was doing this thing and I got a mentor, and that's the word that he used. And this guy started walking me through this process. And he's going through this whole thing, and I'm trying not to laugh because it's a very heartfelt story. Then at the end of it, I'm like, Mike, did any of that sound familiar to you? And he's like, yeah. He goes like, yeah, we're like, Nico, you just ran through the 12 steps without running through the 12 steps.
Exactly.
And he's like, he's thought about it. He's like, yeah, because he had these outskirts of the recovery thing. And that's the coolest thing. Literally what we talk about. Mike's the one that came up with the saying, making our little corner of the world a better place. Okay, so when we do that, and when we help other people, and our sponsor and his sponsor and all these guys in Cleveland always call it AA math. We give, and we get back more. None of it makes any sense, But it is really, you could label it recovery math if you wanted to. It doesn't have to be AA math. It's just what we were taught. But the other thing too is what I thought about is all this bad shit, So you take the chance, you follow your heart, everything that Mike said. And then my thought, not just getting around people, and I'm like, life does this to us every once in a while. Like, okay, you want something, motherfucker? How bad do you want it?
Yep.
I'm gonna punch you there. I'm gonna kill your cat. I'm gonna do all these different
Yep.
things. And then, do you still want it? Yeah, get your fucking ass out there and cry in front of people you don't know and read some
Exactly.
shit.
Do some hard shit.
Yeah,
Yup.
how fucking bad do you want it? And it's beautiful because and I'm being a little bit crass about the whole thing, but that's really what I think about every time, weird shit happens. And Mike and I talk about, we sat in a meeting years ago. We were really raw, new, 2, 3, 4 weeks, maybe a month sober. And this guy's up at the podium and he's talking, he's telling a story. And he's 5, 6 years sober. And he tells us, he's like, he goes, I don't have bad days anymore. And we're all fucking brand new. We're like, you're fucking nuts, dude. Look at where we are. This whole place is bad days.
Right.
And what he said, he goes, I have bad moments. He goes, these things that happen, and Mike and I talk about it. Every day that you have is whatever happens. All this messed up stuff happens throughout the day. Every
Mhm.
one of us can pick out good moments. We can pick out these bright moments. Was it, I don't know, was it 23 hours and 55 minutes of bad moments and you had 5 minutes of peace and serenity? Then it wasn't a bad day. You had a bunch of bad moments in there.
Right.
And that's the thing, is every time I get these things that are, thrown at me, and we talk about it too. It's not things that are happening to us. What are these things trying to teach us? What can I learn from this? We're not special. I'm not. It's why not me? I mean, I got to go through stuff.
Exactly.
Everyone's got to go through stuff. But what a great thing, because all these things, it's the tenacity, it's the the matter, the action, the will, and whatever you want to call it, to keep moving through all this garbage to get to this point where you're. Yeah, I mean, you get you start living a relatively happy life, and you're helping people, which is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to piggyback. I figure I better tell a little bit like what we got going on now too, because
absolutely.
Since kind of that inception and all that happened, there's been a lot that's happened since then too. Right now, I've been working really closely with a nonprofit in Wisconsin called Rise Together. They do a lot of storytelling and youth outreach and stuff like that. So we've been doing a lot of. I've gotten the chance to go to Philadelphia to go to a summit. We go to a lot of different like youth centers in prisons. So kind of that helping people and like that larger vision that I kind of explained before has really started to come to fruition this last year. Like I've gotten a lot of opportunities to get out there with the public and do like actual outreach and like actual advocacy through art, which is kind of like the whole point of this at the end of the day. And like I've been able to partner with a local poet here named Chelsea, and we have a slam poetry competition that we are getting going, and writing workshops for youth and marginalized groups out here, because we have a lot of that in some of our less wealthy neighborhoods. So all these really, really cool things have been able to come to fruition. And it really is like pushing through those times where it's like, do you want it bad enough? Because I've had so many of those. I've had a shit show of the last 6 months to a year. So like I've had a lot of those moments where I kind of have felt like I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if like I have it in me to continue pushing through all this stuff. But every time that I do, it's like this immediate, not immediate's the wrong word. It doesn't always come immediately, but I'm always getting back, so much more than what I put in every time.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is gratification. It's just not fucking instant.
Exactly.
So, and as you were talking about this, and I want to make sure I'm going to put all these notes or all these links in, be at least in Spotify. I don't know if it clicks through on everything else, but so I see you have a website, your alexshottonpoetry.com. There's your Lift Poet Society or Lifted Poet Society. Do you want me to direct people to your book through Amazon? Is that preferred? Because
it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble is where it's at so far. But Amazon is probably the preferred. Yes,
easiest one. Okay, so I've got that. And then I was just trying to look up Rise Wisconsin. Is there a website with that?
It's called. I think the website is We All Hold on. Let me...
You're like me when I type we
That's
all.
exactly what I'm doing.
Come on,
Oh,
dude.
what is it?
You're fucking young too. We're in our mid 50s here.
I'm in my late 50s.
Yeah, I was trying to give you the benefit of the doubt. You know?
I appreciate it. No, as of last Tuesday, I am no longer in my mid fucking 50s.
It is weallrisetogether.org.
Okay, Sam. Now
Cool.
I'm going to do it. We all rise together. Okay, but yeah, I'll put the link to that too.
I did follow you guys on Instagram too. I got
awesome.
you over
Okay.
there too. So my Instagram's Alex Shot and Poetry, but I'll send all that over to you in an email too, just so it's
Cool.
So it's
okay. But yeah, and I'm not trying to cut you off. I mean,
you're fine,
don't worry, we're not even close to ending necessarily yet. But I need to if I want to make notes about these things, I obviously want to
I'm
do
the
it.
exact same way. I understand.
Yeah, it is, but it's weallrisetogether.org though,
Yep.
correct? Okay, perfect. But okay, so you got the thing still back in Wisconsin. You're doing the thing down in Arizona. I mean, when the book itself, when did you? I don't know. When did you put the book together? When did it come out? Was there a book beforehand? You said, or
There
Yeah,
was.
The meditation style one, right?
oh yeah, okay.
What was it? God, it was a cool title too. Say it again.
It was Tomorrow Stole Today. I love.
Yeah,
the title,
that's
yes.
it. Yeah, that's great. Well, and that's fucking recovery
Yeah,
shit too, man.
absolutely.
Right? Yeah, right. You're letting the future or the past steal today, and all we have is right fucking now.
Exactly. I want to. Quick side note on that one. I really want to redo that book. I put that book together, not hastily, but I had no idea what I was doing. I wanted to learn how to be able to self-publish. Yeah, I wanted to be able to learn. I was like, if I want to do this for other people, I need, just like AA and NA. You know, if I want to do this for other people, I need to learn how to do it myself. So like that was a real big learning process for me, and I really want to go back through it and kind of re-edit it and get it, because I really think it could be a lot better than what it was, but I still love it, and I still love the concept of it.
Right.
But that one came out right after I got back right before I went out to Washington DC. So kind of the same time that I won that contest, that book came out. And then when I got back, actually, it was kind of the same situation as when I lost my cat and I wrote a poem there. I didn't really know what to do. I think a lot of people, and I don't know if this is probably just a human nature thing, not just addicts and alcoholics, but when a lot of really good things happen, or like I'll just use the example, when I got like flown out to DC and like I got to perform a poem in front of like, hundreds of people, and I had a bunch of people come up to me afterwards and be like, "Oh, we can't wait to see, where you go from here." You kind of get this, like, I got this inflated ego, and I got like,
I was just thinking, stroking your ego, right?
Exactly.
And it makes you lazy.
Exactly. So then I get home, and that's all stripped away from me. I don't have Macklemore's phone number. He's not calling me and telling me how great I did anymore. I don't have all these people, showing up and being like, "Hey, you're doing this amazing job." It's just me alone again, and it was kind of like nothing was coming out. I was waking up at like 4 a.m. and I was drinking a bunch of coffee, and I was trying to force as much of this creativity out after that whole experience, because I'm like, hey, I can't stop now. Like, we just got a little bit of momentum, we got to go, and nothing was coming out. Like, I was just like, I was coming up empty. I was just staring at my computer screen, I was just staring at notebooks. And so I got coffee with like my only friend down here. Her name's Angelica, and she's this amazing poet. And we got coffee one day, because we used to have these little writing sessions where we would just bounce ideas off each other. And I'm just like, I need your help, because I don't really know what to do. And she's like, well, what did you do last time? What happened when you were feeling like this? And the whole my cat Bravo passed away. And I'm like, that makes sense. Like, I kind of saw where she was going, and she's like, you kind of need to try to channel that same feeling of like wanting to get it out. It just didn't want to come out as much as like my cat passing, because that was like an immediate traumatic thing. This was like something that was deeper inside of me. And so I went home that day from the coffee shop, and I wrote this poem called "I Learned How to Love from Heroin." That was the title. That was literally the title of the poem, and it's actually the prologue now to the book. And I just wrote it out, and it was like this spoken word piece, and it was amazing. Like, it's to this day probably my my favorite poem that I wrote, but it just describes how I was a human and how like heroin was this woman that I fell in love with. And it describes her as like, it identifies her as a human rather than a substance. And,
Right.
and it really helped me put into perspective all of these feelings that I had unpacked in years and years of therapy, but I kind of repacked because I didn't need them anymore. You know what I mean? I didn't really need to talk about, you know, like my experience with heroin. And now I was able to channel these emotions in like a way that felt really healthy. So like for the first time since probably prison, I was writing about my use and my addiction in a dramatic, poetic way, but in a way that felt really healthy to my soul. And I just did the same thing. I ended up going out to San Diego. Actually, me and my dad took a little 6-hour trip out to the coast of San Diego, and there was a poetry slam competition, which is basically, if for people that don't know what a poetry slam is, it's an open mic. So think of like an open mic for a musician or like a comic or like a poet, and it's just like, it's a competition. So like the people in the audience judge, instead of it just being like a random open mic, they give 5 people scorecards and you're judged by 5 random humans that night. And that's just it's a subjective way to kind of look at poetry and make it a little more fun. But I performed this poem out there, and I didn't realize that I was in the presence of like poetry royalty. Like there were people out there that had won like national competitions and were like repeat world champions, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but it was amazing. Like my poem really resonated with people. It's like one of those poems where like when I perform it, I like kind of go into a trance because it's so like it's that much of like a part of me that like it really just puts me into this emotional trance, and people really resonated with me. I had multiple people come up to me afterwards. I got so much contact information, and it was another one of those experiences where it was just like, you know what, screw it. Like I remember telling my dad, because he's retired, and he was like, yeah, well, if you want to go, we'll go. You know what I mean? He's like, I got nothing else going on. And but the funny part is I needed him to drive home because I worked the next day. So it was a Monday poetry slam, and we live 6 hours away. So it's a 12-hour round trip drive. So we left that day at like 6 a.m. and I drove out there. We did the poetry slam that was at like 7 p.m. and then we got back on the road at like, 10, and my dad drove back. So like we just did this 12-hour trip, and I was like, I feel like a starving artist. We're like, we packed up the van, we got the guitar and the drums, and we just headed out west to the first performance we could find. But it was such an amazing experience, and it just, the floodgates opened after that. I got home, and the book just flowed out of me. And honestly, I wrote the book in probably less than 2 months. It took me about 9 months to edit it because that part is really, really, really hard for me. So, but again, I wanted to learn how to do it all myself because in the future I would like to, be able to publish books in like a professional manner for people in recovery. So yeah, that's kind of how that got started. And then it released on, why am I blanking on the date? It released on, I believe, November 12th. I could be completely butchering that, but it was sometime middle of November.
Gotcha.
So just this past November, right?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Okay. So here's a weird thing. And again, probably something that maybe we talked about in all the emails back and forth, but there was a time when I got your email, and I only say I because I just happen to be the one that fields the emails.
I don't do shit.
But so when the email came in from you, there was like, God, probably there had to have been a handful, because I was forwarding all these things to Mike too. Anytime we get obviously a guest request or somebody like yourself, anything like that, Mike and I, well, most of the time, there was one that we just got today. Like, yeah, I answered before I even sent it to him because this one I know he wants anyhow.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that in the future. But so send it to him. We always talk about him. But there was yours and probably 5 other people that had either projects or books, and the emails almost looked like they were all structured the same. Okay, so my question to you is, how did you hear from us? Where did we end up on a mailing list? I guess just curiosity wise.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just used like a freelance like marketing website. Not marketing's the wrong word. It's like a freelance literature website. So it's like Fiverr, but for like literature, if that makes sense. And
Okay.
there was an author on there that had just lists that he compiled. So he compiled like library lists, he compiled like self-help podcast lists. He basically had just spent his time compiling all these lists, anyone that had open guest requests. And then I literally just I paid him a small amount of money and I got the list. And then I used MailChimp to just send out basically a mass
Okay.
email to everybody. And then honestly, I didn't hear back from a lot of podcasts. I was excited when I heard back from yours. I heard back from a lot of libraries, surprisingly. Libraries are all about self-published books, which I was not aware of whatsoever. But yeah, that's how I found out about y'all.
Interesting. So there was somebody else, John, that we had Mike over the summertime when he had the book about the monkey. I can't think of the book that he wrote. It was a recovery book. John's been around for a number, but same thing. He had like an assistant that said, hey, he wanted to get a hold of different podcasts. And the same thing. It was like within minutes, this lady found a list of podcasts. We've ended up on a few of these different lists, but it baffles me because I don't know how people I don't know how people find us. We're a small podcast. We're not out there really. I haven't signed up for any lists or anything like that. There's one website that I don't know if I had to join or whatever it was, but it's called FeedSpot. And it ranks podcasts. And I think it said if you want to submit your podcast out here, and I did, and we rank very well on there, which quite honestly, I have no idea how. I don't know. I don't know.
Listen, you guys are entertaining. I listened to the whole last podcast, and I listened to the whole hour and 44 minutes. So I mean,
Wow.
y'all are entertaining.
Thank you. But I mean, we're ranked when we first came out on FeedSpot. We were in like, I don't know, we were 25, 29, 30 something. We've been in the top 5 for like a year and a half. We're at number 2 right now. And the only reason I look every day is the one that's ahead of us right now is Recovery Elevator, and they're a big deal. Recovery Elevator, now if you ever heard of them, they're a podcast. They do retreats. I heard about them to begin with. The first podcast, sober podcast I ever started listening to, Mike. That's the first podcast that she listened to. So I know of these folks, and they're a big fucking deal. They're always number 1. I want to knock them out just once. All I want to do is get a screenshot of being number 1
Hell
on
yeah.
FeedSpot one time. I don't care if it never happens again. So if I think about it, I'm like, fuck, I got to check that today. But parts of these things, that's the interesting part. I mean, it's always interesting to us how people hear about us because, again, we're not one of those, big podcasts or anything like that. But, we've had a lot of people say, too, that, my God, you guys responded right away, or I can't believe you even got back to me. And I'm thinking to myself, well, we get back to everyone. We respond to everyone. We've said a lot of no's.
Yes, we have.
And we're not afraid to say no. We don't take everyone. I don't mean that for you to feel special, Alex, because you said yes.
Don't stroke my ego, okay? Don't stroke my ego.
It's not, number one.
Shut down his creativity, man.
Well, here we go, Alex. We needed a guest, so you just happened to be around.
All right.
It's okay. Bar time where you just every chick that's walking out, you're like, you want to go home with me? You want to go home with me? You said
I was the
yes.
winner, huh?
That's it.
Yes, all right.
You said yes.
Hey, we'll take the wins where we can get them.
But no, it's just that we respond to everyone. But we become very particular. We've been approached by people that want us to, promote non-alcoholic beverages. Neither one of us have any problem with people who drink them. We just don't, so we're not going to promote it.
Right.
There's been, certain things, whatever this and whatever that, and there's people on there that we look at and we just don't. If we don't think that, number one, that we line up with it right, or we think that the people who listen to us are going to get the most out of it, because that's really what it comes down to with a guest.
Absolutely.
Is somebody going to get something out of this? Because going back to whole selfish and self-centeredness, when we started this podcast, Mike, what was our goal of this?
Our goal is to just hang out on Friday night, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's all we were going to do. I was listening to Sober Podcast. I'm like, we're sitting here at our sister's house, standing outside of Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling about all these fucking podcasts, and I'm listening to them. I'm like, we could do that shit, right? We could just, talk a bunch of shit into microphones, right? But we had no idea how to do it. So I made a couple of inquiries, and we started off on our phones with I feel bad for people that listen all the way back because the audio is terrible.
Yes, it was.
But what we use now, the studio that you're in now, Alex, it's Zencaster. It's very cool and it's cheap. It's $20 a month, but it's wonderful. It's all that we need. But literally we figured, let's get together. Mike and I wanted to have a meeting, wanted to talk and tell some stories. And then, people started listening, and it's kind of cool. And then we realized the fact that we started getting a little bit of feedback, and that feels really good. It's humbling when somebody's like, I listened to you. This is exactly what I wanted to hear. Whatever the case may be, that shit, that's fucking golden,
Exactly.
Again,
It's
helping other people, man.
Yeah,
That's the whole
absolutely.
fucking point.
Yeah, which is, I mean, pretty much what you've been talking about, Alex, with all of this, with your books and with your poetry, and getting out in front of people. I mean, you're out there helping other people. I mean, that's got to be. It sounds like it's very gratifying. I mean, I know it is, but right?
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And it's weird because this wasn't. I never thought that was gonna be like the fulfilling thing. Like
Right.
I always knew, like, especially when I was like in and out of the rooms, I knew I liked talking to people. Like I liked being able to share my story, and I liked being able to help people. But I didn't realize, like, when I finally like let go of like being a self-centered asshole, and like I actually like when I actually genuinely started enjoying helping people, and not because I think back in the day I enjoyed talking because I knew I was good at it, and I knew that selfishly people were going to tell me that like what I said resonated with them because I was able to weave it in a way that resonated with a lot of people. And like I was able to drop that somewhere along the line through a lot of therapy, if I'm being honest. But I was able to drop that, and now it's like I genuinely find so much joy in just being able to like do the next right thing. And that's like the motto I live by is I always try to
Really?
just do the next right thing no matter what. And honestly, it's turned into like such a cool experience. Like the opportunities I've had, the people I've met, like it's been so cool where like life has like started to take me, and that's through a lot of bad shit. Like I had two pretty major surgeries over the last 6 months that just came out of nowhere. And I've been able to, like you said, recognize those bad moments, but they haven't gotten me back to that place where I was, or like I haven't been able to not deal with it in like a healthy manner. So it's been such an amazing experience actually enjoying genuinely like helping people rather than like enjoying the part of my ego that gets, petted every time, someone tells me I did a good job for helping someone else.
Right.
Yeah, pretty fucking nice, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, in the do the next right thing, man. We were taught that almost like it had to be day fucking one, right, Mike? But
Yeah.
we say that on here all the time. Do the work, get the results, do the next right thing. If all else fails, if you do those two things, do the work and do the next right thing, whatever that thing might be. You got a pretty goddamn good chance of making it through the day without hurting somebody else. At least not intentionally.
Right,
So
right.
but yeah, it is amazing because some of this stuff, and I mean we've been around the sober community, and we've been sober for a little bit, but the character defects and the problems, and we need to do, when we talk about it all the time, we're not fixed. We're certainly not recovered. We're not just all done with this stuff. It is every single day we're this was explained to us at a retreat. We're sitting in a group, and kind of one of the breakout meetings, and this one female got up, and she was telling her story, whatever, and she's like every morning when I wake up, she's like, I'm standing at my toes at the edge of a cliff, and she said every day I wake up that way, and that's where I am. I'm about ready on the edge of the cliff, ready to fall over the cliff. But she said, I just got to keep, I do my readings, I do my prayers, and I do this and I do that. And she's like, everything that I do for my recovery allows me to take a step back. And she said, by the end of the day, if I'm doing everything properly, she's like, I can't even see the edge of the cliff anymore. But she's like, guess what? In the morning, she's like, I'm right back at the edge of the cliff again.
I
And
love
that was
that.
one of the, both Mike and I were like, that's amazing.
Yes.
It was just, I'm a visual person. It was such a great analogy. But literally, yeah, I mean, getting out there and doing these things, yeah, we got to do it every day. We got to get up. Both of us do readings every morning. We're trying to do that. We do this podcast. This is part of our recovery. We get out in the world, and even sometimes not even thinking about it, trying to do, that next right thing. But man, same thing we were talking about before. What we get in return is absolutely amazing. Just amazing. So, quick question. And we're gonna You've obviously had. Did somebody contact you from the Sober Curator, Alex, to do a book review, or did somebody just do the book review for
I
you? Do you know?
believe I believe I sent some emails back and forth with somebody about the book review. Yes.
Okay, so we're part of actually the Sober Curator also.
Okay, that's
Um,
what I kind of was able to deduct from the last episode I listened to. Yes.
Yeah, so the short story there, it's been about a year and a half. We actually it was a fun story, fun way that we ended up meeting Elise, who was the one that created the Sober Curator. But so
Yes.
we got
Elise,
involved
that
with
was the
her.
name. Yes.
Yeah, and she's really cool. She's very, very cool. But she's the one that started it. She's got this whole group of people called Sober Curators, all volunteer people, submit content, blah, blah, blah. So that's what Mike and I do. So I wanted to let you know that because I saw the book review up there, although, it's a relatively short book review. Basically, what we'll do, and we've had it happen before where we've had a podcast guest on, we tell Elise, they'll put it up on the Sober Curator, so they can feature this episode with you on the Sober Curator, unless you object. That was my plan to let her
No,
let her
no,
know to
I
do
love
that.
that. I've been checking out the Sober Curator a lot actually since that review went out. They have a lot of I love everything they're doing.
Yeah, and it's a very cool setup, and they're very focused on. It's not that they're not that they wouldn't cater or that the website doesn't cater towards the newcomer, but it is meant for more so people that are in got a couple of years under their belt type of thing. How do you stay sober? Because
Right,
their
right.
tagline is getting sober is great, but staying sober is the best, or something like that. But so, and again, I was going to say, unless you object, basically what they'll do is they'll take this episode, they'll put it up on the Sober Curator, and obviously, usually refer back. It'll be a companion piece to the book review, and hopefully get you a little bit more, exposure on that. But it's been the Sober Curator has been good. We do a lot back and forth. They promote us. We try to promote them as much as we possibly can. But it's a good group of people, and again, if you're ever looking for somebody, to as far as again, other podcasts, there's a bunch of different podcasters on there. I don't know a lot of these individuals with the exception of the meetings and stuff that we have, but it's a great community of people that help each other. So just be mindful of that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah, so what else? I mean, in kind of wrapping up here, I mean, what else do you want to get out to people? I mean, I'll put links to everything we talked about. The only thing that do me a favor, as soon as we get done recording here, send me the link to that Wisconsin one,
Okay.
because that's the one I couldn't find, the We All Rise Together one. That
Okay.
one I couldn't locate, but shoot me an email on that one. But I'll have links to everything, obviously the book and the different websites and that sort of thing. But I don't know, what did we miss, or what else do you want to talk about? Obviously it's your opportunity and your chance to tell the people a little bit more about you, or what you want to say.
Yeah, I think what else is there? I think the main thing that I want to focus on now, I think the main, kind of the plan, kind of the immediate plan moving forward for like me and for the Lifted Poet Society is really to try to get out there in the community more. With me being connected to Wisconsin through Rise Together, I found a lot of fulfillment being, a part of the community up there and being able to do, outreach and stuff like that up there. But, the main plan for, the Lifted Poet Society moving forward here is I really want to spend these next couple years really entrenching myself in my community down here and really trying to get a lot of workshops going. And I want to be able to do that online as well. I think that in the digital world these days that there can be a lot of extra reach and a lot of people that can be affected if I get that stuff going online. So I think the main thing that I want to leave this with Lifted Poet Society stuff is that advocating through art is definitely not utilized, I think, as much as we can. I think you both mentioned it. If I just step back a second, when you mentioned that woman who spoke at that conference and used that analogy, that's such a the thing I love about art and the thing I love about poetry is it's such a complicated way to look at something that makes it really, really easy to understand. They took she took a really simple concept and turned it into like an elaborate story that allowed you to paint a picture in your head that completely got rid of the thoughts. You don't have to think. When someone provides like an image, when someone provides an art piece that elicits emotion from you and elicits healing from you, it kind of gets rid of the thought process. You don't have to worry about those fleeting thoughts jumping in everywhere, and you can kind of just focus on like the feeling and focus on, you know, the healing aspect of it. And I think that's the really cool thing about art. So I'm really excited over these next couple years to see where these workshops, both online and in person down here in Arizona, go, because I think we're just getting started. You know, there's been a bunch of times where I felt like I was at like the climax, and, you know, each time, you know, I kind of feel like I get knocked back down humbly. And like, I feel like we're starting to get to that point where things are going to become more tangible and things are actually coming to more of fruition. So I'm excited. I'm excited for the next couple of years.
Well, and as you in two things, I'll say it again. Keep in touch with Elise at the Sober Curator when you have events, when things go. All these things you're talking about would be things that I think, and I don't think I'm wrong, but I think that Elise and the Sober Curator would be interested in being involved in.
Cool.
They're all about promoting events and recovery things and different ways to promote a recovery. And, you know, I never thought about it when you just said it through an art piece like that, but I'm a visual learner, and I would have never thought about, like, when you just said that individual took that thought of doing the work and made a picture and made a story out of it. And Mike and I will never forget that, you know.
Right.
And it's beautiful. And when you read something or have somebody show you something that has that sort of meaning, that's a great point. But so, number one, keep in touch with them when you got things going on. Even if it seems like a minor thing or a minuscule thing, mention it to her.
Okay.
You never know. She's all about, she wants to be able to promote things like that, especially less of the mainstream, something new and different, you know, that invokes people in recovery and that sort of thing. So that's number one. Also, if there's anything that we can ever help out with, if you got an event going on, once again, we're not a huge podcast. We don't have a huge following on Instagram. But if you have something going on, shoot us an email. We can do a post for you on Instagram. Or if you want us to collaborate with something on Instagram, just all you need to do is invite me to collaborate. I'll include it. And then it's the easiest way. I don't give a fuck. We'll put it on our Instagram page.
Cool.
Okay?
Cool. I appreciate that.
Then, and same thing too, you know. We had a guy, Gary, who's been a guest on here twice, showed up on another podcast a month ago, I think, Mike, when we got that spike. And Gary and the guy he was on with, John, we had both of them on as guests. They literally talked about our podcast for like 4 minutes, and it doubled the number of people that were listening to us. And again, we don't have this
That's
huge
awesome.
following.
That's cool.
But I mean, just this little mention, I never would have expected it. You know,
Right.
neither one of us would have. So whole point is, if you got something going, let us know. Even if we got to, I don't say got to, that's the wrong way to put it. Even if we just, you know, spend a couple of minutes and say, hey, you know, do you remember Alex that was on about the book? He's doing this. Check him out here. We're more than happy to do it. And that's all this whole point of this. We're all in this together is kind of my whole point. Okay?
Absolutely.
So, all right.
Yeah. That's
First
awesome.
word of the first step, man.
We
Absolutely.
So it's a we program, you're saying, Mike.
I've heard of that somewhere.
Right. All right. So, Alex, you know, stick around here. If you listen to the whole episode last time, you know what's coming up. But it's Mike's turn. It's time for you and I to get quiet. Mike's gonna close out the episode, but we're not done yet. So don't go away, Alex. Okay.
Got it.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Sober Not Mature. Thank you, Alex, for coming on and making our little corner of the world a better place tonight. And now, go out and do something nice for somebody else this week. You know, do something for yourself. Do something and don't tell anybody you did it. Now, it is time. From the bottom of my heart to the depths of my soul, from the beginning of time till the ends of the earth, always and eternally, fuck you. And now it's time, kids. It's time for you to fuck off. Keep fucking off. Keep fucking off till you get to a gate with a sign on it saying, you cannot fuck off past here. Climb over that gate. Dream the impossible dream and keep fucking off forever.
That's Mike's favorite part. You know why? Because it's the
it
end
means
of
we're
the
done.
episode. Yeah, it means we're done. But no, that's a fun part. Our sister gave us that. Another friend of ours gave us the first part of it. It's the way we end off the podcast, and it's a lot of fun. But everyone, take a look. It'll be in the notes on if you looked on Spotify. If not, take a look on Spotify. There'll be links to everything that we talked about with Alex. Obviously, take a look on Instagram. If the links aren't there, you'll see where to find him. All those sort of things. Alex, thank you very, very much for coming on. I mean, it's been a pleasure. I mean, you're talkative, but you know what? The number of guests that we've had on, and I'm not going to name anyone, but there's been a few people, like the first half of the episode, we have to kind of drag people through and then people get comfortable. You were comfortable right away. You made our jobs, if you want to call it that, they're making our jobs easier tonight. Right, Mike?
Absolutely.
All right. But seriously, Alex, thank you very much. Mike, I love you, brother.
Love you too.
Thank
we'll
you
talk
both for
soon.
having me. Very
Yeah,
much
Absolutely.
appreciated.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, don't run away yet. We're going to say goodbye.
I won't.
Don't
Gotcha.
run away yet. All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. And now it is time for you to fuck off. Then keep fucking off. Keep fucking off until you get to a gate with a sign on it saying you cannot fuck off past here. Climb over that gate, dream the impossible dream, and keep fucking off forever.